of the guests on the Wiley show are those
She's always dealing with reality. With love she imparts, her soul is a heart. She knows that through the love will make you grow. Come on, you find out what you need to know. Running is the golden road, where the river meets the road. I'm not saying one little shore, one little.
What's up, guys? What's up, guys? Woo! Boy, I tell you, technicality is something else. How y'all doing out there? How's everybody doing? I'm back. Hey, y'all, what's happening out there? I'm excited to be back with you one more time. Once again, I'm excited to be back with you. Hey, y'all know who I am. I'm Wylena, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel, and y'all know what show this is. This is the Wylena Show, and this is where the rubber meets the road. And I tell you what, the rubber is about to meet the road right here on the Wylena Show. It's about to be on. I am so excited that you guys came back to be with me again today. And I know you missed me last week because we didn't do a live show last week. But I tell you what, you can't keep a good girl down long. And I am back once again, and I'm looking forward to what I'm going to be bringing to you these next two shows, today and next week. If I tell you the truth, it's going to be off the chain. And I just want to welcome everybody back. I want to welcome all of my Facebook friends back, all of my viewers who are out there watching on YouTube and Google Hangout and listening on Spreaker, and all of those who are out there tuning in on YouTube and WylenaTVShow.com. Everybody who is out there, and all of my social media family and friends. I'm excited that you are back with us again today. And if I tell you, it's going to be on. I've got two guests with me, and I'm looking forward to what they're going to be bringing to the table. And this is a shared burden. That's the topic today, a shared burden. What's your take? What is your take? Should atheists and religious people join forces together to fight against President Trump, racism? I don't know. But you guys, you got to give me the answers, okay? I want the answers from you guys. That's all I'm going to say right now. I'm looking forward to you guys giving me the answer. Okay, so listen, I just want to say that it's just been awesome to come back with you again and share, what we're going to be sharing. So, but what I want you to do is shoot me an email, if you will. Shoot me an email at WylenaTVShow@AOL.com with your topics and your questions and your comments. And if you want to be a guest on the show, make sure you shoot me an email with that information as well. WylenaTVShow@AOL.com. And friend me on Facebook, if you will, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would greatly appreciate that. Okay. And the phone lines will be open after we finish what we're going to be doing, because my guests are going to do presentations first, and then after their presentations, they are going to then at that point we will be opening up the phone lines. Okay. And so I want to just make sure that you guys are prepared for that. So with that being said, the phone number will be and is 702-850-5580. That's 702-850-5580. And that's when the lines are open. That's the number that you will call, okay? And when you call in, you'll state your name and where you're calling from, and then ask your question or make your comment, and you'll take your answer off the air. Don't ask me no questions, because I don't have no answers for you. That's why I'm here to ask questions, okay? I'm looking forward to asking questions of these guests, okay? And don't be rude to anyone. I mean, you have a right to agree to disagree. You can say that you're wrong. If you want to say they're wrong, you can say you're wrong, or whatever the case may be, but just make sure you disagree respectably. Okay? All right. And if you do not, you know what I always tell you I would do? I would introduce you to what I call a brand new collect, and that's hang up the phone on you. All right? So listen, and if the line is busy, just hang up and try to call back again. Okay? Don't leave a message, because we're not checking any messages. All right? So listen, I just want to make a quick verbal commercial break. not my regular commercial break, just a verbal commercial break. I don't want to have any more technical difficulties than what we're having, so I'm just going to do a verbal spiel here, and that is, if you will, and if you enjoy the Wylena Show, would you please please, please, please support the show financially. I would greatly appreciate that. It would be awesome. I mean, if you're logging on to WalenaTVShow.com right now, if you look up at the top of the screen, there's a little pay button up there. You can drop that down. You can just make any type of donation that you choose to make to the Walena Show. It'd be greatly appreciated. Okay, and that helps us to market and helps us to get the word out and all the different things that we do to keep the show going. All right, and for those of you who have already made donations to the show and contributed financially to the Walena Show, you are the bomb. You are the bomb. I love it. Okay, thank you so much for helping this show to keep going. I appreciate you as well. All right, so listen, we were supposed to have two guests here today, and I only see one of my guests that has arrived, and so my guest that has arrived, that's who we're going to be talking to. And if my other guests show up, then of course we'll be talking to him. So, but for the most part, I have one guest right now, and we gonna hold it down. If the other guests don't show, we just gonna hold it down anyway. Okay, and so the guest that I have with me today is that of the atheist belief. Atheist, okay? Oh yeah, that's what I said, atheist. And so we're gonna see what the atheist guy has to say. Now, this is supposed to be a conversation between atheists and religious, non-religious and religious, okay? And right now we got the non-religious guy here today, Mr. Atheist. Well, I mean, he's not Mr. Atheist. Boy, y'all know how I am. I get things all twisted up sometimes. But anyway, he's not Mr. Atheist. His name is Joe Rollins. Joe Rollins is joining us today, and I just want to welcome him to the show. Joe, are you with me?
I believe that I am. Can you hear me all right, Miss Waylener?
Yes, I do hear you. I hear you clearly. So, Joe, how are you doing? And tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do, and blah, blah, blah. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, okay? Thanks.
Okay. Hopefully not too heavy on the blah, blah, blah. I'm Joe Rollins. I'm the ex-Mormon atheist. I was raised Mormon 23 years, the first 23 years. And I was even a Mormon missionary at one point. Served 2 years in Lima, Peru, at which point I, after a lot of very difficult soul searching, discovered that I no longer believed in God, which wasn't really much of a problem before I was a missionary, trying to convince other people that not only was there a God, but that my God was the true one, and that you should stop whatever you've been doing and come over here and do what we do. And as a process of kind of losing my faith, I kind of found a whole new epistemology and shared that in a book that I wrote in and published in 2013 after I was excommunicated from the Mormon Church for apostasy and conduct on becoming a member of the church. I was telling you, Miss Waylener, right there, if you can see where my finger is, that is the actual letter framed and posted on my wall from the church notifying me that after my disciplinary court, it was decided that I was no longer a Mormon, which I went into with eyes open. And since then, I have more or less been on the internet and known to among people as the ex-Mormon atheist, and known to people who Google excommunication from Mormonism. If you look up the excommunication of Joseph Rollins, that's Rawlins, you can actually listen to the recording of the church court proceedings for which I was excommunicated from Mormonism. Since then, I, have been more or less on hiatus since publishing my book and reconsidering the direction which I'm moving online and in my personal life, and decided that I need to take more of an approach, a stronger approach than just I am not a believer in God. Because a lot of people, when you tell them that you're an atheist, they say, well, you don't believe in anything. And that's not true. I believe in some very important things. And so that's why I suggested this topic, and I think that we'll have a great conversation, Miss Waylener.
Well, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Joe Rollins, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to be discussing here today, and what the callers are going to have to say about you as well, and what they're going to have to say to you. Oh, so we're going to see what is the how the rubber is going to meet the road right here on the Wilena Show. So listen, you already answered my very first question. Uh, and I was pretty sure you would do that. But I'm gonna still take it a little deeper. I do hope that my other guest gets the opportunity to join us one way or another. I know he had technical difficulties yesterday trying to do the test run, and so it's a possibility that he's having even more technical difficulties today. But meanwhile, we're here and we're going to bust a move. So, Mr. Joe Rawlings, you already basically answered one of my questions, and that was going to be the first question, but I still want you to give me a little in depth. And my first question for you was, do you believe there is a God or superior being? And you already told us no, that you don't. And so I would like for you to go into detail as to why is it that you don't believe that there's a God or a superior being of some type. Why do you believe that that's not the case, Joe?
Well, that's a great question, actually, and I think that it's definitely worth going to more detail about. Certainly, at one point, I did believe in God. Now, there's going to be some discussion, and I'm sure maybe at least one caller I'm thinking, I'm a little bit hoping, has an opinion that Mormons aren't even real Christians, that they don't even believe in the real God. When I talk to people about atheism, there's a lot of people, especially Christians, who believe that even other people who believe in gods of other sorts, like pagans or Muslims or, Jews, are atheists also because they don't believe in the correct God. So they're technically atheist. And I think that's interesting because an atheist is really not, it's not a religion. I'm not going to use that crude example, but there's a lot of language that we use as atheists to say that atheism is not a religion. And that's because, as I think one of the smartest atheists today, Sam Harris, has said, atheism has no content. I mean, what do you get out of believing there's no God, or more importantly, not believing there's a God? In fact, when in his one of his best speeches, he said, it's like believers, when we agree to be called atheists, it's like believers made a chalk outline on a crime scene and we just walked up and lay down in it. But really, atheism is a label. It's not meant to identify what you believe. It's meant to identify what you don't believe. And it wasn't so much that I became convinced that God didn't exist, as it was that I became less and less convinced that the God of Mormonism existed. And more specifically, I didn't really believe that anybody was hearing my prayers anymore. I didn't really believe that I needed a savior. And from there, I didn't really believe that I needed a prophet to teach me about a savior, and became increasingly unconvinced. Again, that process really started when I was on my mission in Peru. So that's the catalyst of what started me into disbelief. Now, in the process of that, I also gained other beliefs. Up until that point, I was a deep felt conservative, I would say libertarian. I didn't like thinking of myself as a Republican when I was a Mormon. Most Mormons that I know are Republicans. But I had a lot of the same beliefs. 2004, I'm embarrassed to admit, I voted for George W. Bush. I was, recently returned home from my mission. And even though I no longer really believed in God, I was in a mode of thinking where I didn't want to challenge the beliefs I already had. And even though I didn't necessarily think that President Bush was a good president, I just wanted to hold the line with something that I did believe. By 2008, though, I realized that my political beliefs had completely shifted. So I do believe new things. And by 2008, I was a staunch supporter of President Obama, now President Obama, Senator Obama. And my politics had drastically changed. And which is a common thing for people who leave Mormonism. So I don't want to monopolize your time, but yes, that's there was a transition process where I didn't just gain a belief that God didn't exist so much as I no longer felt that God existed and was more interested in what was true about the universe as what could be demonstrated empirically and rationally.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Joe. Listen, some people would say that how do you think you got here? I mean, I know there was a mother and a father and that type of thing, but there's people that would say, how do you think you got here if you don't think there's a God? Or how do you think you're breathing if you don't think there's a God? So how would you answer that question, Joe?
Thank you very much, Ms. Wayliner. That's a great question. I mean, as far as how do we get here, and I personally and you and everybody else here, I think that, and I'm happy to answer that question, but I want to first say, I think some of the folly behind looking for God in that answer is that we as humans tend to look for purpose. What is the design? What is the purpose of our life? And it's no wonder that we do. I mean, this life is hard and we go through a lot of troubles where, especially those of us who are parents or trying to keep marriages together, and sometimes they don't stay together, trying to get through work situations, political situations, dealing with problems of our health and so forth. And we think, gosh, if life is going to be worth it, all of this has to mean something. There has to be something I'm getting out of it. There has to be some kind of plan that's happening here that I just don't see. I just don't see the big picture. And the truth is that plan doesn't really exist, I would say. And that looking, again, this is an epistemological difference. In epistemology, by which I mean, so that we're all on the same page, I mean, how do we know what knowledge really is? What do we know? And we can look around at the universe that we live in and see some very big indicators of this is where God should be. And he isn't. I mean, there's something like, for example, the SETI program, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, has identified more than 3,000 exoplanets. That's planets outside of our solar system that are roughly the same size as Earth and exist somewhere within the Goldilocks zone, right? Goldilocks zone is not too hot, not too close to the sun, so it's too hot, not too cold, so far away from the sun that it couldn't sustain life. They're these sweet spot planets, just like Earth or somewhat like Earth, that could sustain life very much like Earth. If all of this is for us, and the purpose of the cosmos, the sun and the moon and the stars and the Earth and all of this, who are those planets for? And if they're for no one, why make them at all? And so it's not so much that there's a definitive piece of evidence for we definitely weren't created by a creator, so much as there's a hole here where a creator should go. And it doesn't. None of the signs add up to that there's a creator there. So then the bigger question I think that most people have to face is, if that's the case, then what is the purpose? What is the meaning? Why do I suffer? Why do I have trials and troubles? Why do I have setbacks? What does all of this mean? And is there a reward for it? So in brief answer to your question, I believe all human beings, like all living species, evolved from less complex species, from less complex organisms over the course of about 3.5 billion years on the course of Earth's history, and evolved by means of natural selection.
Okay. The rubber Mr. Road on the Wall Eater Show. Y'all, I already know y'all gonna have to help me out with this guy right here. I'm already knowing. Believe me, I feel it coming. Okay, so woo! I tell you the truth. So I'm gonna. So I already know. Well, what you? I know you don't believe in the Bible, of course, in short, I don't want you to take too long because we got a lot of information to cover here. So, can you just tell me in short, Joe, why do you? Because I know you're gonna say no. I was gonna ask you, do you believe in the Bible? And I'm pretty sure your answer is no to that. So, with that being said, why do you choose to not believe in the Bible? And please make it as short as you possibly can, about a minute and a half thing.
Sure, I can make it very, very short.
Okay.
I don't only not believe in the Bible. I, more importantly, don't believe in the Book of Mormon. I don't believe in the Quran. I don't believe in revealed religion at all because I don't believe that there's a God to reveal anything. And that's again, the epistemological difference is one thing is to go back into the Bible, say for the creation story. And the Bible supposedly tells us where it all comes from, gardens and talking snakes and Adam and Eve, and whatever your interpretation of what that is kind of like, I compare it to going out there and driving a stake into the dark and say, this out here in the dark where we can't see anything, this is the beginning, and everything lines up to where we are now. The problem is that when you go backwards, in that same line, you see, but that's not true, that's not real, that's not real, this isn't real. And if you look like a detective saying, okay, well, over here in the light, over here where I am and where we live today in modern society, we can see how the earth is, we can see how the cosmos are, we can see these artifacts from the past, and we can do our detective work and go back into the past. And the deeper and further we go into paleontology, the study of like dinosaurs and so forth, into archaeology, the study of ancient civilizations, anthropology, the study of modern civilizations and how those have evolved in their own way. Sorry, I don't know if you can still see me.
No.
My phone is dying. And and we can go back into our history and into the history of peoples and of species on this planet and see that nothing lines up with the philosophy of, well, let's drive a stake in the dark and then build the history from that point forward, if that makes sense. So that's the reason why I don't believe in any revealed religion at all.
Okay. So basically, we don't want to talk about the Book of Mormon, and we don't want to talk about the Quran and all these other religions or books, spiritual books. We want to talk about the Bible or the Torah, that book. Okay, so with what you just said, now that particular book, it has statements in it that people use today, that people say today, these things are happening now. And this was predicted back centuries ago in this particular book. So how can you say that there's no, are you saying that there's no proof and that type of thing? Because I'm just saying, since the religious guy is not here, I guess I got to try to put it, work it that way. So, are you saying that book there's no truth in it? Because there's many people that would totally, and I mean fervently beg to differ with you on that because of the fact that particular book, or have you even read it in the first place? I guess that's a good question for you too. Have you read the Bible, any form of it, any interpretation of it whatsoever, be it from the Torah to all the way to the NIV or whatever? Have you read any of the Bible? And if so, have you not seen information in there that basically predicts what's happening right now, what people are dealing with right now, wars and rumors of wars, men being lovers of men and women lovers of women, and famine and earthquakes and all these different things that's biblically profound. What do you have to say about that, since you're talking the way that you're talking as if there's absolutely no proof in this book? I need you to just kind of help me out right there. Would you please?
I'd be delighted to. So I agree that there are a lot of people who would say that the signs of the times are all around us, and they are proof that the Bible, especially books like Revelation or Apocalypse or Isaiah or Jeremiah, what else could we say? Even the Gospels contain predictions of what would happen in modern times, that if you looked at them, you would see that they are, in fact, happening. I can tell you an example. When I was young, I followed very closely a Mormon scholar by the name of Cleon Skousen, W. Cleon Skousen, who is somewhat popular in political circles, but not nearly as popular as he is in Mormon circles. And he wrote a book called Isaiah Speaks to Modern Times. And I used to just eat that stuff up. I mean, oh yes, tell me all the things that, the children of Israel mounting up on wings as eagles. And, I thought that, again, this was my purpose. It is my purpose to be, in Mormonism, we have this tradition called Saturday's Warrior, where you're supposed to, this generation is supposed to be the great generals who lead in, the second coming of Christ. And another thing that I really held to, I tried to get the price tag off of this because I had to buy a new copy of it, is this book called Mormon Doctrine by Bruce R. McConkie. Now, just look at this right here. This book is chock full of passages of scripture from the Bible and from other Mormon scriptures. Mormons have a lot that say that everything in the scriptures, especially the Bible, verifies that Mormonism is true and that the end of times are being fulfilled. The end of times prophecies are fulfilled in Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon and the modern priesthood, now Russell M. Nelson, the new prophet of the church. And unfortunately, this book, it's now been edited. This is the edited version. I can't find an unedited one. Even included a passage in which he explained why persons of color, African descent, would not ever hold the priesthood. Now, that's when this book was published before 1978, when the church changed its mind and decided that God wanted black people to have the priesthood the same as whites. And so, I mean, that's the problem that I see with end of time prophecies, is that we have to change them because they're interpreted. You look in this passage and somebody sees, this passage is talking about Apache helicopters. I've heard that one. Or this passage is talking about wars and rumors of wars. We actually are having a relatively peaceful time in the history of humanity compared to times past where humanity ran rampant with war. I mean, war was a fact of life under the Roman Empire or under the Middle Ages. And so it's all a matter of biased perspective of, here I am now, and I'm looking into the past. I'm looking for something that I can put in context of what I'm seeing in current events. And before I hand it back, to answer your question, I have read the Bible, Old Testament and New, King James Version.
Okay. You know what, y'all? I had said that I wasn't going to open up the phone lines because this guy, he's going to do a presentation on our topic, which the topic is, it's about religious and atheist people. What's your take on the fact, should religious and atheist people join forces together, come together, and fight against racism under the auspices of Donald Trump? Now, I know we always say that you don't mix religion and politics and that type of thing together. That's one of the things that we constantly say on a regular basis. But, I mean, it looks as though religion and politics are mixing themselves up. They didn't wait for the Wylena show to do it. It's already happening anyway, y'all. So I'm just trying to get in where I fit in. You know what I mean? So listen, I want to I want to allow but you know what? Lord have mercy. I just feel like the callers want to talk to you, but we got so much to cover. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share an article with you, but I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone lines because I just got a feeling that the callers I just got a feeling that the callers just might want to get in on this, and I really kind of hate to keep you guys just out there. You know what I mean? So while we're opening up the phone lines, I'm going to go ahead and share this article with you all, and then we can move on. And the article is an article that I picked up from Huffington Post, and it was put out December 2017. And it says atheists and Christians share many of the core universal values that are at the heart of a just civil society, and a new study suggests. There were no major differences between Christians and those who do not believe in God in their moral attitudes toward compassion for those who are suffering and ensuring justice and fairness for all, researchers said. Surprised? Are you surprised? You would not be alone. When atheists and Christians were asked to judge one another, members of the two groups fell back on many of the negative stereotypes that fueled the culture wars in the U.S. The research indicated atheists typically describe Christians more negatively than Christians described atheists, but both groups often claimed the moral high ground. In sum, atheists and Christians in the United States appear to be quite unfamiliar with one another's foundational moral concerns. Researchers Ann Simpson and Kimberly Rios of Ohio University reported in the International Journal for the uh, Psychology of Religion. But the developing body of research in the field portends a more hopeful future in which the atheist Christian dialogue is not dominated by hardliners such as Richard Dawkins, the bestseller author of The God Delusion, has said that faith seems to me to qualify as a kind of mental illness. Once a common ground on moral values of caring and compassion has been established, Simpson said, you're much less likely to be prejudiced. Given that both atheists and individuals with a strong faith often suffer from negative stereotyping, it might seem that they would have reason to empathize with one another. Just a cliche holds that there are no atheists in foxholes. It's commonly believed that there are no atheists in overwhelmingly Christian Black America. African Americans are the most religious ethnic group in the nation. Non-believers make up just 1% of the population. After all, it is not always easy to be an atheist or an evangelical Christian. OMG. What's your take on that article, Joe?
Well, that's very interesting.
1 second.
Yeah.
And 1 second. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines. And if there's anyone that want to call in and say something to Joe right now, you'll be able to do so at 702-850-5580. That's 702-850-5580. Go ahead, Joe. Elaborate on that article, would you please?
I would love to. I'll start by saying that on the whole, I actually agree with that to some extent, in that I don't know if you're surprised by that conclusion, Miss Weilener, but there do seem to be a lot of moral overlaps between non-believers and believers. And I mean, we have similar feelings about stealing. We have similar feelings about killing. We have very similar feelings about lying, which is interesting considering we both think of one another as somewhat believers of lies, that believers say that atheists have been deceived by the devil or by their own, pretended intelligentsia. And, atheists look to believers and say they believe the lies of some book from some dead culture of goat herds that's been gone for a long time, and we can accuse these things to one another. And I'm going to go easy on that. I love Richard Dawkins. I think he's a brilliant man, but I'm going to go very easy on the Richard Dawkins thing because we're going to come together, I hope, during the presentation. And I want to make an appeal to your listeners, Ms. Weiliner, who are believers, that we really do share a lot more than you might think. Now, as far as those statistics, I'm going to have to call that out because at least 20% of America's population are unbelievers. If you count atheists, agnostics, and people who are so-called none. They just don't have religion. They're soft atheists, I call them. So I'm not sure where this 1% of the population statistic came from. Or maybe I heard it wrong. But we're definitely a growing voice. And taken as one block, which we can't really be taken as one block as yet. But non-believers make up the largest minority group in America by a fat margin if we learn to vote together, which kind of we already do because there's a Pew Research poll, I believe. I'm sorry, I don't have the figure right in front of me, that showed that most people who identify as atheist and agnostic, at least, do vote Democrat in America. And so, as far as politically, we do have very similar values.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And I appreciate your feedback on that article. Okay. So listen, Joe, I had promised you that, and I know you've said quite a bit already, but our topic is what's your take? It's a shared burden. What's your take? Should atheists and I'm not going to say Christian, I'm going to say religious. Should atheists and religious people join forces together to fight against Donald Trump and racism? And of course, this would be, it's funny that this came about like right now when it did, due to the fact that we got this big dilemma going on now with Roseanne and then, of course, her getting the apology that came across. And then, of course, President Trump saying, well, nobody apologized to me for putting my head on or whatever, chopping block or whatever. I don't know. He said something. Don't quote me on what he said because I really don't know what he said exactly. But I know it was something to that effect where he was stating that he never got an apology for whatever he felt that he was owed an apology for. So I guess he's saying, why should anybody else get an apology? Why should the woman that was in question, that was the political supporter for co-worker with former President Obama, why should she get an apology when he didn't get one? So, it raises the eyebrow of the people in the world. I'm not even just going to say America. I'm just going to say the world, period. I think it's raising an eyebrow, and so I guess this show, which we didn't know when we set this show up, we did not know that was going to jump off. So, the rubber meets the road right about now, and so I think the show is very timely right now. Unexpectedly. So, Joe, you were given the promise of being allowed to do your presentation on this particular topic, and then after that, we'll see how much time we have left. Although I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do your presentation, and it looks like we've got about 15 minutes left on the show. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do your presentation. So you go right ahead and you tell us what you feel and what you think that we need to know in relation to, should religious people and atheist people join forces together to fight against Trump for racism. Go for it. Joe, it's all yours.
Cool. Thank you very much, Miss Waylena. And I want to thank you again for having me on your program. I'm sorry that we haven't been able to be joined by our other guest. I hope to be able to have a conversation with him at another time because I was looking forward to that conversation. As far as the Roseanne Barr thing, I think it's a good place to start before I really say anything. You know, it was Valerie Jarrett that she had this very racist thing to tweet about in the middle of the night while she was hopped up on Ambien. And
okay, it looks like we're losing Joe. I hope we don't lose Joe. Oh, because he's having some technical difficulties right now, it appears. And I don't know if he realizes that, but he's froze up on us. We can't see him or hear him. So we're going to try to give him a couple seconds here to get his technical stuff straightened out. I don't know if his a computer died, phone died, whatever he's using there, something died or something froze or whatever. So anyway, he was about to talk. Okay, it looks like he's back with me. So let me go ahead and let him pick right back up where he left off. Joe, are you in a position here to pick back up? Because we've only got a couple more minutes left. Here we go. All right, the floor is all yours once again, Joe. Go ahead. Okay, he's trying to reorganize himself over there. Okay. All right, so Joe, the floor is all yours. Pick back up with Roseanne, please, because that's where we lost you. Okay, now it looks like we have no audio. We can't hear you. So we're not able to. Okay, there we go.
You hear me now?
Yeah. Oh. Go ahead. Take the floor, please.
My goodness, how many technical difficulties. Maybe there is a higher power getting involved. All right. All right, so let me pull up my notes here. So
okay. Okay, wait. You said it. I didn't. You said it, Mr. Atheist himself. Now, all right, go for it, Joe. That's the rubber meets the road statement right there. Go ahead, Joe.
So the comment that she had made, I won't repeat because I think we've all heard it by now, and it was racist. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And the thing that's interesting about it, just following up on the story there, what happens is that Bob Iger, the president of Disney, which owns ABC, which runs Roseanne's show, which I've never thought was funny, he called Valerie Jarrett and apologized to her and said, that's not acceptable in our networks, it's not acceptable in the Disney family or whatever, and apologized to her. Now, of all the things that Donald Trump could have done at this point, he could have come out and condemned it, because Roseanne Barr has been very vocal proponent of Donald Trump, strange creature that she is, and said, and you know, he could have come out and tweeted, as he is prone to do, and said, you know, I don't condone this behavior either. This is a terrible way to talk about a public servant. He could have said any number of things to dismiss the racist element of what she was saying, whether or not she was hopped up on Ambien at the time. And he didn't. Instead, he wants to know, when is Bob going to call me to give me an apology about the awful things that ABC says about me on their news networks? And it was like, whoa, where did this come from?
And that's where I really, to start out, and cut me off, Miss Weiliner, if I go over my time. But I have about 15 minutes of material here. We're going to get through as much of it as we can. But here's my main concern about why Donald Trump is a problem, and racism, as Donald Trump's election has manifest, is a problem for both atheists and for believers. And let me just get into it. The first thing to notice, okay, I am a staunch atheist. I have been for years, over a decade now. But I have some heroes of mine who are believers. One of them is President Barack Obama. I miss President Obama in a way I find hard to describe. And one of the greatest things I've ever heard President Obama say is about faith, actually. That's surprising, considering the very mean things I've said about faith. President Obama said, quote, my faith is one that admits some doubt and lets me question. I love that statement, because doubt means that we admit that our own opinions can be wrong. Because there is a difference between being correct and being incorrect in accurately describing reality. Now, this is something that we might have been divided on in the past. I'll tell you, Miss Weiliner, when I hear these things that are being said that are so contentious between believers and non-believers, between Democrats and Republicans, between people across racial, ethnic barriers, I think of you. I think of conversations that we have had where we disagree starkly about some big things. We disagreed today on whether or not the Bible is legitimate. We've disagreed on whether or not God is real. We disagree on whether or not life has meaning and purpose. Those aren't small questions. Those are big questions. And we've had this conversation many times. And yet I would go so far as to say we are friendly. Maybe you don't want to say friends, but I'll go so far as to say we're friendly in our conversation. Atheists and believers can have conversations where we agree on at least this point. At least one of us is wrong. That's not something everybody agrees with, and that's why racism is a problem. Now, let me just back up, because maybe that's a bold statement. Maybe that's where the rubber meets the road. Some people, atheists and believers alike, believe that if I have an opinion about something, if it's true to me, then it's true. And you have your truth and I have my truth. You have your reality, I have my reality. When you and I talk, Miss Weiliner, it's very clear that's not true. We both agree there's one objective reality and one of us is wrong. And I think both of us agree that if it's me, I am in a lot of trouble. And so I just want to keep going here. I'm going to check and make sure I'm still, because I had to switch screens. Okay, 72% of Republicans think that Donald J. Trump is, quote, a good role model for children. That's in a Quinnipiac poll. 72% of Republicans say that Donald J. Trump is a good role model for children. Now, Tony Perkins, he's the president of just about the most conservative think tank in the world, the Family Research Council, says that Donald Trump deserves a mulligan. Now, this man is a preacher. He is a well-known preacher out there in conservative Christian circles here in America. And he says that in his response to the Stormy Daniels thing, to President Trump basically being accused, and nobody really doubts, that he has had an affair with a porn star. And this man comes out and says, well, he gets a mulligan. Now, can you imagine for a second that Barack Obama, if it was discovered, had an affair, cheated on Michelle with a porn star, that Tony Perkins or any other conservative leader would come out and say, he gets a mulligan. You know, that happened before he was president, so we wiped the slate and everything's fine. I believe in Dr. King's dream that a man can be judged by the color, not by the color of his skin, but by the contents of his character. And that's not just to prove that a man is good. It's also to prove that a man is bad by his character. That's a common belief you and I think share, Miss Weiliner, and that I think I share with your viewers and your listeners. that being white doesn't make Donald Trump good, despite what some may think, and it doesn't make him bad, despite what some may think. His being a liar makes him bad, which is why it's surprising that in that same poll, 35% of Americans said that Donald Trump is not dishonest. And how can you look at Donald Trump's character and say that he's a good role model for children with a straight face? How can you say that he's not dishonest? It's because some people believe that if they believe it's true, that nothing else matters, that the truth is just what I believe. It doesn't really matter what's actually real. There are dangerous consequences to thinking that everyone's opinion is valid or that everyone gets their own private path of truth. Now, this week, we saw Roseanne Barr's comment. Now, this is why it's so important to me. Let me jump ahead here. The 2016 election. Roseanne on her show makes the case that Trump appealed to people who needed jobs. Now, there are people all over this country who need jobs. Thanks to President Obama, there are far fewer than there probably would have been had the recession continued as it was. But there's an interesting study that was done about the 2016 election about why people voted for Trump. Was it really about jobs, or was it about race or sexism? And this is a quote. It says, economic variables, or jobs, or income, were dwarfed by the relationship between hostile sexism and denial of racism and voting for Trump. That's in a study led by a political scientist named Brian Schaffner. Now, this is why opinions being validated without science, without facts, without respect for reality matter. Now, I want to call you back to 2008. Remember in 2008, there was a John McCain rally. This is at the height of John McCain's rally after the big Sarah Palin fever. And a man stood up at a John McCain rally and said, and frankly, this is a quote, and frankly, we're scared. We're scared of an Obama presidency. And John McCain, he's not Sarah Palin. He responded to the man, this is a quote, he is a decent person, and he is not a person that you have to be scared of his being president of the United States. And then they booed him, Miss Weileiner. They booed him for having said that. Then he goes and takes another question. This one you may remember, if you didn't remember that one. There's a woman stood up and says, I've been reading about Obama, and I can't trust him. He's an Arab. Now, this again is another quote from Senator McCain. And he said, no, ma'am. He takes the microphone back from her and says, no, ma'am, he's a decent man that I happen to have disagreements with. Now, that was 2008. How much has changed in a decade? Now, this is a quote from Political Science Quarterly. In 2016, college-educated whites were more supportive of Hillary than they had been of Obama in 2012, while whites without a college degree moved even more dramatically toward Trump. Something changed. Something between 2008 and 2016 changed in our political discourse. So Dr. Schaffner's study asked 2,000 Americans to respond to dog whistle statements. I think we all know what dog whistle statements are, so I won't go over those. But they were dog whistles about sexism and racism, like agree or disagree, women are too easily offended. Now that's a soft way of saying, do you think women are getting out of control and losing their place or something like that? That no sexist person would actually say, yes, I think they, but something softer and easier, but means the same thing. Women are too easily offended. Do you agree or do you disagree? Or another one is, racial problems in America are rare, isolated events. Of course, nobody's going to come out and say, well, people of this ethnic group brought it on themselves or something like that. That's too blatantly racist. So you needed a soft way of saying, do you agree with the statement? Do you disagree? And this is a quote from the study, from Dr. Schaffner's study. He said, moving from one end of the sexism scale to the other was associated with more than a 30-point increase in support for Trump among the average likely voter. Relationship for the denial of racism, which is in and of itself a kind of racism, was nearly identical, moving from the highest levels of acknowledgement and empathy for racism to the lowest was associated with a 30-point increase in support from Trump. We are combating a world where people believe that having an opinion means that your opinion should be respected and treated as valid. It just isn't true. There's a difference between having a right to an opinion and a right to have your opinion validated. Now, this is where we as atheists and believers can agree to this small piece of sanity in a world gone mad. One of us is wrong, and someone else needs to say so. And we can do it politely and in a friendly disagreement. That's why we have these conversations. But as long as people think that their opinions are valid because they are their opinions, racism is par for the course. If I am entitled to having my opinion respected because it's my opinion, then dog whistles for racism in my culture, saying, oh, you know, this ethnic group needs to assimilate better culturally, or these people need to X, Y, Z. We've heard them all. I don't need to repeat them. That if I say, look, that's the way I was brought up, that's my opinion, that's where I come from, that's what my belief system is, you have to respect it. Or why aren't you trying to respect the beliefs of where I come from? As long as we say those opinions deserve respect as much as more valid opinions that are based in empiricism, rationalism, science, or at least some solid form of epistemology, some solid agreement that there is a reality that you and I don't influence with what we think, and that if we think differently than what reality states, we're just wrong. We cannot let it go. And I'm going to breeze through this so I can get to the most important chunk here. So John McCain went on The View last year, and I don't watch, but I read that John McCain went on The View, and he talked about that moment where the woman got up and said, you know, that Obama, I can't trust him. He's an Arab. And this is what he said. He said, when someone says something like that, when they say he's a Muslim, you can't let that go. You remember that Donald Trump, after that, the whole fiasco happened, financed Joe Arpaio. I'm from Maricopa County, Arizona. Don't ask me to start about Joe Arpaio, rotten human being. Went off to Hawaii and set up a commission to find Obama's real birth certificate and find proof that Obama faked his birth certificate. It's like we let that go, whether we admit it or not, whether we like to or not. As a society, as Americans, we let that go. Now, here's the thing. That commission didn't find any evidence that Obama faked his birth certificate and was born in Kenya. But it didn't matter. The decision had already been made. That when I feel in my heart that Obama's not a real American, whoever that person may be, Donald Trump is with me. And that paid off in 2016. So I just want to skip ahead because, again, I don't want to use up all of our time. I mentioned Sam Harris. Sam Harris said this week in an interview, all lying is just destructive of the social fabric. If ever there was an identity politics we don't need, it is white identity politics and white male identity politics. We need to find some path to a future where our common humanity is the only basis on which we reason about human flourishing. Now, that's an atheist, probably the most famous atheist outside of Richard Dawkins, who is saying something I think is probably the most important thing we need to be hearing in the age of Donald Trump. So these are the two things I'd like to suggest. One is there's a saying, there are words we can unite on, atheist and believer, and come together and say, at least one of us is wrong. Those are the words. At least one of us is wrong. Whenever there's an argument, wherever there's a discussion where race is involved, I encourage us to get in there and get a friendly conversation going and say, you know what, I disagree, and at least one of us is wrong. As soon as the conversation turns to, well, no, I have my truth and you have your truth, no. At least one of us is wrong. It may be both of us, but it's at least one of us. Very much like the atheist believer thing. If I'm wrong about God, then I'm wrong and I'm in trouble. We both agree. Then I want to talk about a policy that we can unite on. The College for All Act. This is an act to make all public universities tuition free. fewer uneducated people, especially fewer uneducated whites in America, means less sexism and racism, less racism. Millennials and younger than millennials now say overwhelmingly that they don't plan to go to college because it's too expensive and it's not worth it. That means we have a generation of Trump voters coming up, and this is an emergency. Am I getting played off?
Yeah.
I got most of it.
Oh, Joe, I tell you, we got to wrap it up, man. We got to wrap it up. But you hold on to those notes. You hold on to those notes, and what we'll do is we'll pick back up next week, y'all. We'll pick back up next week. Yeah, I know you were giving us some rubber meet the road information. So, but listen, everybody, tune in with us again next week, and we will definitely have Joe Rollins back with us again, who is that of the atheist. And then, of course, hopefully, we will have our religious guy back with us, who was not able to make it today. We hope that we will have him with us next week. Okay? Y'all know who I am. I'm Juanita, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel, and y'all know what show this is. This is the Juanita Show, and this is where the rubber meets the road. We'll see you next week.